I think the Clann project and Hogan Lovells is just an amazing thing that they're doing, really. I think it's going to absolutely help everybody. I met with them recently, and I know there's an inquiry going on in Ireland. I said, but how does anybody know about that? Where's the information? Because I've not seen any, and I'm sort of involved in that adoption world. So I really hope that they can get that message out there and get the information out there, letting people know they can come and tell their stories, whichever part of the adoption triangle that they are in.
When you left the maternity part after 8 weeks, we all went to the main home, and you actually got the job we had to do for however long you were there. So it was the garden, the kitchen, and I ended up in the laundry for 3.5 years. He was the most adorable boy. But you see, you were only allowed to see them an hour a day, 4 o'clock till 5. Once I'd finished the laundry, went straight up and saw them for an hour before tea. But I used to hug him and kiss him, sing little songs to him and all sorts of things. There were such precious moments they were, you know, so you made the most of them, really, as any mother would, you know. And then there was one very lovely nun there. She, every now and again, she'd take a little photograph of him, you know. We weren't supposed to, you could not be taken with your baby. You were not allowed to be taken with your baby. So she'd sneak me one. She said, when the Reverend Mother wasn't looking. And of course, I never had any money for the 3.5 years, and there was a little shop there, you see, and every now and again she'd give me a bar of chocolate to give him, or sweets or something. She was very, very, very kind. On a Sunday, for instance, she'd say, oh, come on in, have a look, you know, have a cuddle with him, you know, that's how it worked out like that. They never told me when he'd be going. And then one day they came up and said, your son is going away. All I could see was him going off. I didn't have a chance to give him a cuddle, nothing, you know. They just took him and off he went. He was taken to the airport, I think. You see, at the time, we were made to feel so guilty about it. We were so ashamed. The word was ashamed. We were just ashamed of what we'd done. We'd committed mortal sin, and that was it. And that's how the thinking was in those days, you know. It was an awful thing to have a baby out of wedlock. So you kept it to yourself. And I kept thinking, oh, I must find him. But I got to the age of 70. All those years keeping it a secret, you know, it was so hard to bring it out. I still had this shame about it in many ways, I suppose. I went home on holiday, and my brother was there, and I said, Toss, I've got to find him. I'm 70 years of age now, and before I die, I've got to find him, you know. So he said, will you, for goodness sake, go back home and tell your son and your daughter? He said, for goodness sake, tell them, you know. And he insisted, and of course I came back, and I plucked up the courage and I told them. And that's where Jane came in, you know, and she's never left off since, you know. And they were so supportive. I should have known better, I mean, for my son and daughter. I should really have known better, you know, that they would only help me rather than hinder me, really, you know. And he was their brother, after all, you know, when you think.
I'd recently moved house, and I'd been decorating my house, and she said she wanted to pop round, and was feigning interest in the decor. It was a bit unusual because she doesn't really pay too much attention to things like that. So clearly she had this thing to tell me. So we sat down, and I think we did open a bottle of wine, and then she just told me. She just sat there and said, I had a baby when I was younger. So I immediately started asking all sorts of questions, and I felt very sorry for her. I couldn't imagine having to give a child up when they're 3 years old. And I think we threw our arms around each other and, you know, had all sorts of conversation, but I wasn't at all upset. I was upset for her and what had happened, but not for me. I was delighted. I thought, wow, this is amazing. And I did ask her if she wanted me to try and find him. And I've learnt with my mother, she always says no first. And then she said, could you? And so when she went home, the first thing I did was, of course, go onto the internet and search for adopted from Ireland. Then I realised that it wasn't the same as the UK. Obviously, I've grown up being used to, if you're adopted there, at 18, you have a right to find out your identity. And I was really shocked when I came across the fact it was so very different here in Ireland. One of the first things I did was I came across a group which has now evolved into Adoption Rights Alliance, and obviously I put a message on there, and I got some very helpful people coming back and saying, oh, you need to do this or do that. And they explained that you don't have an automatic right to your identity or to trace here in Ireland. But they had their own tracing guide, like a step-by-step guide to try to do it for yourself. So I followed that guide to the absolute letter. Obviously, I wrote all the letters, but I made out I was mum. I mean, she signed them. I mean, she was fully backing everything. And over the period of about, I think it was about 7 or 8 months, I wrote to each of the government departments in turn, and they all wrote back saying no, they're sorry, they couldn't help, or that the files, they had found an adoption file but we couldn't have access to it, and all that kind of information was all just not forwardcoming. And then the last person I wrote to basically told me to write back to the first department. So through the Adoption Rights Alliance website, I realised that there was only one person left to write to, which was a nun in Cork who had all the records. So finally, after getting rejected from all of the government departments, we wrote to her. And she came back after a few weeks, saying, when Mum was admitted to Seanmoss Abbey and when Anthony was born, with all the dates. And then the last paragraph of the letter said, we have some information to share with you. Please, can you telephone? And Mum, of course, thought that meant that they were going to tell her where he was, that she'd found him. I was a bit more hesitant because I hadn't heard very good reports about this nun and always being that truthful, so I didn't really know what to think of it. And then we did telephone. Mum came to my cottage again and we telephoned, and she was told basically over the telephone that I think the nun's exact words were, "I'm sorry to tell you, but he's dead." And then she read out the notes from when his ashes were interred. She gave us his adoptive name, which was obviously Michael Hess, and not much else, a few names of the people that had been at his interment. And then she said that there was a plaque to Anthony, we call him Anthony, obviously he became Michael, at Seanmoss Abbey. That was a really traumatic night for Mum. It was for everybody, it was such a really big shock. So after she'd gone home again, I went back onto the Adoption Rights website, and I remembered that somebody had been there previously and taken photographs from Seanmoss Abbey, one of them being Anthony's headstone. And I had seen it before, but it just hadn't registered with me that that was him. But of course, once we knew his name was Michael Hess, and then I found the headstone, I Googled his name and Washington, and that's when I found his obituary and found out who he had become. In his obituary, it said that he worked for the Republican Party, so I wrote to them, but I didn't get anything back. And at that time, 2004, social media wasn't like it is now. And also, I didn't know Anthony's life over in America. I didn't want to be intruding into anyone's life. So I just I think I emailed them, said, oh, it's some long-lost family from Ireland, looking for this person. But I didn't get any response. And I think a friend of mine had happened to pop into my house. And I think I was telling her the story. And that's when she said, oh, I know the journalist Martin Sixsmith. Now, my immediate reaction to that was to say, oh, you can't bother him with something like this, because I remembered him being a political correspondent on the BBC, but of course he had worked in Washington. So she saw him sometime later at a family party, cornered him, and told him the story, and then he contacted me, and I met him, and it kind of picked up from there, really. Because he had the contacts in Washington, he managed to find Anthony's partner and Mary, the girl that was adopted with him, within a matter of a couple of weeks, really. And it was after that that he decided to write a book, and then everything else just evolved from there, really. The day we met his partner was a very special day because he brought so much. He brought the videos, he brought Mum a ring, he brought photographs, so we could see his whole life. Of what happened to him. But one thing that I remember thinking was quite sad was that he tried so hard to find her. And Anthony's partner, he was quite shocked when I said the first time we'd gone to the convent, they wouldn't tell us who he was or anything like that. And he was surprised because he said Anthony really wanted to be buried there, so if Mum ever went looking that, they would tell her. And they didn't really, did they? And if they had given us the information the first time we went, I never would have met Martin, and never would have been a film. All of this would never have come about, really.
It was such a shock when I first saw it. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. Just such a shock. It upset me so much, really upset me to see it. But it was good to know that I could visit him when I wanted to visit him, you know, as much as I could anyway. I know he knows we're here, you know. And I can always say a little prayer when I come, and it's nice to know that he's not forgotten.
I was just very sad that we never got the opportunity to meet him. We actually met with his partner very recently. He came over to visit us, which is the second meeting we've had, and that was fantastic. And the way he describes Anthony's personality, I think my daughter would say that he's very like me, just the way he thinks about things and or the way he behaved. But his partner said that he would have absolutely have loved this family. You know, he said Anthony just would have loved the whole thing that's going on as a result of his story being told, being, I think, the political creature that he was himself. His story is hopefully going to make a lot of difference to people in the future.